It all started with a lie. A simple, harmless lie that unraveled into something far darker than I could have imagined. 2 weeks ago, my sister Clara told me the family vacation was canceled. Too expensive, she said with a casual shrug, adding, Dad isn't feeling well either. Let's aim for next season. I believed her because why wouldn't I? That's what families do. They tell the truth, right? Wrong. As it turns out, the only thing they were aiming for was to leave me behind without so much as a heads up. When I stumbled upon the truth, completely by accident, I felt like someone had punched me in the gut. There I was, standing in our parents' house, holding a bag of groceries I'd brought them, when I saw the suitcases lined up neatly by the door. Laughter echoed from the kitchen. My brother bragged about his hotel upgrade, and Clara barked orders about packing the right outfits. They were leaving today, without me. The betrayal hit hard, but what came next shattered whatever lingering trust one had left. As I stood frozen in shock, trying to process how I'd been so blatantly excluded, Clara glanced at her phone, smirking. Her glossy pink nails tapped lazily on the screen before she looked up at me with that condescending smile I've known since childhood. She didn't even flinch when I confronted her. Oh, you thought we postponed it, she said sweetly. No, silly, it was postponed for you. And just like that, I became invisible again. But the worst part? Later that evening, while refilling my water glass in the kitchen, I accidentally caught sight of Clara's phone lying face up on the counter. A text message glared back at me, sharp and cruel. Thanks for helping me get rid of this loser. My blood ran cold. It wasn't just Clara's words. It was the realization that I wasn't their sibling or son anymore. I was nothing more than a walking ATM, a tool to fund their perfect little lives. As the initial shock of their betrayal began to settle, I decided to dig deeper into my bank account. What I found there wasn't just infuriating, it was devastating. Line by line, transaction after transaction, the truth unfolded like a twisted map of exploitation. Every single expense for this so-called family vacation had come out of my pocket. The $12,000 villa rental in Aspen, first-class plane tickets totaling over $8,500, travel insurance premiums, spa packages, even the gourmet welcome basket waiting at the lodge, all charged to me without my knowledge. But as I scrolled further back through years of transactions, the scope of their deceit widened into something far more sinister. This wasn't an isolated incident. This trip was merely the tip of the iceberg. Birthdays, anniversaries, holiday gifts. They'd been siphoning money from me for years under the guise of family unity. Each extravagant gesture they flaunted. The designer handbag Clara carried to Thanksgiving dinner or Dad's new Rolex was funded by sacrifices I didn't realize I was making. The final blow came when I stumbled upon a series of large transfers marked as household expenses. At first glance, they seemed innocuous, but something about them felt off. My gut told me to investigate further, and what I uncovered left me reeling. Clara had quietly begun planning to sell our shared family home, a house I'd helped purchase with my own savings, and use the proceeds to build her dream mansion. There were emails between her and real estate agents discussing offers, floor plans, and construction timelines. None of these included me. Not one document bore my name or signature. It wasn't just greed driving her actions. It was erasure. She wanted to erase me entirely, turning the very foundation we all grew up in into another monument to her selfishness. I sat there staring at my laptop screen, shaking with rage and disbelief. How could someone who shared my blood treat me like this? The house wasn't just property. It represented memories, stability, and everything I thought we stood for as a family. And now, she wanted to rip that away too, leaving me with nothing but debt and heartbreak. For the first time, I realized the full extent of their manipulation. They weren't just using my money. They were stealing pieces of my life, piece by piece, until there would be nothing left. As the weight of their betrayal sank in, I couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about the vacation. It was about years of being treated as nothing more than a walking wallet. Every sacrifice I'd made for them, every late night spent balancing their financial messes, suddenly felt like fuel they burned without a second thought. And then it hit me, a call from an old friend, Sarah, who I hadn't spoken to in ages. She casually asked how things were going with my perfect family. Perfect? The word stung. I forced a laugh and changed the subject, but her innocent comment triggered something deeper. I remembered a conversation she'd once mentioned, something Clara had said at a work event years ago. According to Sarah, Clara had called me a failure in front of her colleagues, citing my lack of ambition because I didn't earn as much as she did. At the time, I brushed it off, chalking it up to Clara's competitive nature. But now, those words echoed in my mind like a cruel prophecy. Was that really how they saw me? Not as a brother or son, but as someone unworthy unless I was funding their lifestyle? The more I thought about it, the angrier I became. Then Clara's voice rang in my head again, not from today, but from weeks earlier when she'd been talking to Mom in the kitchen. He always sits in the corner, judging everyone, she'd said dismissively. This trip needs light energy, no bad vibes. Bad vibes. So that's what I was now, a dark cloud hovering over their perfect lives. They weren't just excluding me, they were erasing me, painting me as the problem so they could justify leaving me behind. It all clicked into place. The subtle jabs, the way they acted like my contributions were expected but never appreciated. This wasn't negligence, it was calculated cruelty. Clara wasn't just using my money. She was rewriting history to make herself the hero of the story. I clenched my fists, staring at the wall. For years, I'd let them take and take, convincing myself it was for the sake of unity. But unity doesn't come with strings attached, and love shouldn't have a price tag. My chest tightened as realization dawned. I wasn't part of their family. I was their meal ticket. And now, they wanted me gone. The betrayal burned like acid in my veins, but instead of letting it consume me, I channeled it into something far more satisfying: revenge. That night, as the realization of their manipulation sank in, I sat at my desk with a cold clarity that scared even myself. They wanted to treat me like an invisible ATM? Fine, but they would soon learn what happens when you push someone too far. I started by logging into the villa's reservation system. It was almost poetic how easy it was for me to revoke their access. A few clicks, and the digital locks were changed. No more entry codes, no more luxury accommodations. I made sure of that. Then I contacted the concierge service, blocking every single one of their phone numbers. But why stop there? I hired an actor through a local theater group to pose as the villa's head concierge. His job? To call them incessantly with absurd requests. We're inspecting your rooms hourly due to health code violations. Or, there's been a gas leak. We'll need you to evacuate immediately. Each call dripped with faux professionalism, leaving them confused and increasingly panicked. But the piece de resistance came when I drafted an anonymous email. Sitting alone in my dimly lit apartment, I crafted the message carefully, ensuring it struck fear into their hearts. The villa, I wrote, wasn't just any property. It belonged to an infamous international crime syndicate. Their stay had been flagged as suspicious activity, and if they didn't leave within 24 hours, the consequences would be dire. Do not attempt to contact management again, I warned. Your safety cannot be guaranteed. Sending it felt like lighting a fuse on a time bomb. I could practically hear their frantic whispers as they debated whether to flee. When Clara called me the next morning, her voice trembled with barely contained hysteria. "What is going on?" she demanded. I sipped my coffee slowly, relishing the moment. "Oh, probably nothing serious," I replied coolly. "Just make sure you don't anger the wrong people while you're there." Her silence spoke volumes. For once, I wasn't the victim. I was the storm rolling in, and they were powerless to stop it. The moment their plane touched down, the chaos I had orchestrated began to unfold. My family arrived at their luxurious villa, or so they thought, only to find themselves stranded in paradise with no luggage, no concierge waiting to greet them, and no way to reach me. Their calls went unanswered, their texts were ignored. It was as if they had been dropped into a vacuum where nothing worked according to plan. At first, they tried to brush it off, convincing themselves that surely this was all some terrible mix-up that would be resolved quickly. But then came the realization. Their designer bags, stuffed with everything from Clara's carefully curated wardrobe to my father's prized golf clubs and my mother's essential oils, weren't just delayed, they were gone. What they didn't know was that I'd rerouted their precious cargo to a remote goat farm in Greece. A location so isolated even Google Maps struggled to pinpoint it accurately. When the delivery service arrived at the farm, the owner, a cheerful but bewildered man named Dimitri, greeted the driver with confusion. "Why are these here?" he asked in broken English before shrugging and placing the bags by the fence as instructed. And then, something extraordinary happened. One of his goats took an immediate liking to Clara's expensive purple suitcase. By the time Dmitri called me, laughing uncontrollably, the goat had claimed it as its new bed. "She is sleeping on your sister's bag," Dmitri said between bursts of laughter. "Very fancy goat." I could barely breathe, clutching the phone as tears streamed down my face from laughing too hard. The image of Clara's meticulously packed belongings being treated like fodder for livestock was almost poetic justice. Every detail, the dirt roads leading to the farm, the bleeding goats surrounding her $5,000 luggage set, the utter absurdity of it all, felt like a perfect punchline to the joke they had unknowingly written themselves. When Clara finally managed to get through to me, using someone else's phone, her voice trembled with fury. "Where is my stuff?" she demanded. I sipped my coffee slowly, letting the silence stretch just long enough to unnerve her. "Oh, probably somewhere scenic," I replied calmly. "Maybe near a mountain view. Perfect for reflection." Her scream echoed through the line, but I couldn't stop laughing. For once, I wasn't the victim. I was the architect of their unraveling. When they returned 3 days early, sunburnt and visibly defeated, I was sitting on the porch, sipping lemonade as if nothing had happened. Clara stormed out of the car first, her face red with fury, hair tied in a messy bun that screamed exhaustion. She marched toward me like a toddler on the verge of a meltdown, designer sunglasses perched on her nose. "What is wrong with you?" she snapped, pointing an accusatory finger at me. I didn't flinch. Instead, I nodded politely and asked, "Clara, how was the farm?" Her scream could have shattered glass. "We were humiliated," she shrieked. "Do you have any idea what you've done?" "You mean besides paying for a vacation I wasn't invited to?" I replied calmly, setting my glass down. My mother came next, dragging 2 carry-ons behind her, looking like she hadn't slept since Athens. Her expression flickered between guilt and rage. "You embarrassed us," she hissed. "No," I said flatly, meeting her eyes for the first time. "I gave you a taste of how I felt for the last 10 years. The air crackled with tension. Clara folded her arms, sneering. "You're just bitter because we didn't want to spend a week with your depressing energy." That's when it happened. My father, still pretending to untangle straps near the trunk, finally looked up. Clara must have thought she had everyone wrapped around her finger again because she blurted out something she shouldn't have. Besides, this trip was supposed to be relaxing. A break from all the drama, including selling the house without telling you. The words hung in the air like poison. I froze, staring at her. Selling the house. Our shared family home. The one I'd helped buy, the one filled with memories, was now part of her selfish scheme? Alex, Clara's husband, emerged quietly from behind the SUV. He looked exhausted, shoulders slumped, dark circles under his eyes. "She's right," he said softly, his voice cutting through the chaos. Everyone turned to him. "I've been silent long enough. You treat him badly, Clara. You manipulate everyone, guilt-trip them, and then cry about being the victim." Clara's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. Alex continued, his tone firm. "You planned the whole thing. You wanted him excluded. You said you were sick of his bitter energy. And then you used his money and laughed about it." My mother gasped audibly, but Alex wasn't done. "He's not the problem here. You are." Clara stood frozen, her face pale. For the first time, I saw cracks in her perfect facade. This was it, the final betrayal. I grabbed my pre-packed suitcase and turned toward the door. As I left, I said casually over my shoulder, "By the way, the goat who slept on your bag? His name is Hector. He sends his regards." The final confrontation wasn't just an ending. It was a declaration of war. As I stood in the doorway, suitcase in hand, my family's desperate pleas echoed through the air like a bad soap opera. Clara's voice cracked as she demanded answers, but her questions fell flat against the cold resolve building inside me. "You think this is temporary?" I said, my tone sharp enough to cut glass. "This isn't a tantrum or some cry for attention. This is goodbye." Before leaving, I made sure every tie was severed, cleanly, irrevocably. First, I changed the passwords on our shared bank accounts. The ones I'd funded with sweat and sacrifice. Gone. Then came the joint properties, the family home, the summer cottage. They were all frozen under legal holds. My lawyer drafted a letter that would arrive on their doorstep the next morning, its contents clear as day. Any further attempts at harassment would result in immediate litigation. It wasn't revenge, it was protection. For years, they had treated me like a resource to exploit, a faucet they could turn on whenever convenient. Now, the faucet was dry, and the pipes were sealed shut. But I couldn't resist one last jab before walking away. Clara glared at me, her face flushed with anger and humiliation. "Do you really hate us that much?" she spat, her voice trembling. I smiled, a slow, deliberate smile that sent shivers down her spine. "Oh, don't worry about me hating you," I replied coolly. "Worry about Hector. He's been getting very comfortable on your purple bag." Her eyes widened in disbelief, and for a moment, I thought she might scream again. But no sound came out. She was powerless now, just like I'd been for so long. As I stepped outside, the weight of their stares bore into my back, but I didn't look back. This time, there was no guilt, no second-guessing. I was free, not just from them, but from the version of myself who had let them walk all over me. For years, I'd carried their burdens willingly, thinking it made me indispensable. Now I knew better. They weren't family, they were parasites, feeding off my sacrifices without ever acknowledging my humanity. And as I drove away, the sun rising ahead of me, I whispered to myself, "No more." For the first time in years, I woke up without the weight of obligation pressing down on my chest. The silence was golden, unbroken by Clara's demands or my mother's guilt trips. No buzzing phone, no frantic texts asking for money, no cryptic group chats where I was either ignored or scapegoated. It was just me, the hum of the fridge, and the soft breeze drifting through the open window. Freedom felt like a sunrise after a lifetime of storms. I started doing things for myself, things I'd always dreamed of but never allowed myself to pursue. One evening, while grabbing coffee at a local cafe, I ran into Jack, an old friend from college. He had always been different from the rest of my so-called family. He listened, really listened, without expecting anything in return. We reconnected over shared memories and laughter, and soon our casual meetups turned into something more meaningful. Jack understood what I'd been through. He saw the cracks beneath my carefully constructed facade and didn't judge me for them. On a warm summer night, we drove to Malibu, parking near the beach as the sun dipped below the horizon. The waves whispered against the shore, and the sky blushed with hues of pink and orange. As we walked along the shoreline, Jack pulled out a small velvet box. Inside was a delicate silver necklace engraved with the words, "Freedom is the greatest gift you can give yourself." "I know how hard it's been for you," he said softly, his voice steady and sincere. "But you've earned this. Don't let anyone take it away from you again." Tears welled up in my eyes, not out of sadness, but relief. For once, someone truly understood. That moment stayed with me as I planned my next adventure, a solo trip to Iceland. No announcements, no explanations. I booked the ticket quietly, savoring the thrill of doing something entirely for myself. When I stood under the dancing northern lights, their ethereal green ribbons illuminating the dark sky, I whispered to myself, "I will never go back to being the servant of a family that doesn't deserve me." And for the first time, I believed it. Weeks passed in blissful silence. No calls, no texts, no cryptic group chats. For the first time in years, I woke up without the weight of their expectations pressing down on me. But of course, they couldn't let it go. First came an email from my mother, its subject line painfully generic. "Let's talk." No, "I miss you." No acknowledgement of what had happened, just a rehearsed script about how this is still your family, and how Clara was now in therapy to work through everything. The audacity of it made me laugh out loud. Therapy? Or another manipulative ploy wrapped in self-help jargon. I archived the email without a second thought. Then came the birthday card, a flimsy attempt at reconciliation disguised as goodwill. Inside was $25, as if that could erase 15 years of emotional exploitation. My mother signed it with a shaky hand. "We're still proud of you." Proud. They didn't even know who I was anymore. And honestly, that was the point. But the real drama unfolded one rainy afternoon when my mother showed up unannounced at my door. Her hair was damp, her mascara smudged, and tears streamed down her face like she'd just stepped out of a melodrama. "Please," she begged, her voice trembling, "we can fix this. Just give us another chance." She reached for my hand, but I stepped back, my expression cold. This wasn't the woman who had raised me. It was the actress playing her part. one last desperate act to pull me back into their web. Without a word, I handed her a legal document, a restraining agreement drafted by my lawyer. It outlined clear boundaries: no contact unless absolutely necessary, no visits, no attempts to manipulate or guilt-trip me ever again. Her eyes widened as she read it, her lips quivering. "You're cutting us off completely?" she whispered, horrified. "Yes," I said flatly. "And trust me, it's better than staying trapped in the chaos you all created." For a moment, she stood frozen, rain dripping off her coat onto my doormat. Then, without another word, she turned and walked away. As I closed the door behind her, I felt nothing. Not guilt, not sadness, not even relief. Just clarity. They weren't family anymore. They were strangers trying to rewrite history, clinging to the roles they'd assigned me. But I wasn't that person anymore. I had burned the script. Weeks had passed since I walked away, and the silence in my life was unlike anything I'd ever known. No guilt trips, no manipulative texts, no late-night calls begging for money or favors. For the first time, I felt untethered, not free in the way people imagine when they dream of vacations or promotions, but free in a deeper, quieter sense. This wasn't revenge, it was awakening. Yet even awakenings come with echoes from the past. One evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the sunset paint streaks of orange across the sky, my phone buzzed, an unknown number. It was Alex. His voice trembled as he spoke. "I'm at the hospital," he began. "There's been an accident." My stomach tightened. He explained that Clara had been involved in a car crash shortly after returning home. She'd been abusing sedatives during the trip, something she'd hidden from everyone, and now she was undergoing intensive psychological treatment. "She kept saying she couldn't handle everything falling apart," Alex admitted, his voice cracking. But none of us saw how bad it really was. For a moment, guilt flickered inside me like a match struck in the dark. Was this what I'd wanted? To push her so far that she unraveled completely? But then I remembered the lies, the manipulation, the years of being treated like nothing more than a walking ATM. "Alex," I said finally, my voice steady despite the storm brewing inside me. "You can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved. And neither can I." He didn't argue. Instead, he thanked me for standing up to them, for showing him what courage looked like. As we hung up, I leaned back in my chair, staring at the horizon. The weight of his words lingered, but so did my resolve. I had found myself again, not through anger or bitterness, but through clarity. They weren't family anymore. They were ghosts haunting a house I'd already left behind. And as the sun dipped below the horizon, I whispered to myself, "I will never go back."